Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Okay. Yeah, we could make a line of organic agarbatti. In fact, in Hebrew they were doing that when I was there. That would be big. Tell people that the incense is killing you. I didn't know that.
I'll try spotting something and sending that out to you on that.
Yeah, you can check out what they're doing in Hebrew. And without any chemicals. So Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 8, Text 16. Eshava Shraya Adhasyad
Eshava Shraya Adhasyad
Gopa Gokula Nandanaha
Gopa Gokula Nandanaha
Anena Sarva Durgani
Anena Sarva Durgani
Yuyamanjas Tarishyata
Yuyamanjas Tarishyata
Eshava Shraya Adhasyad
Eshava
Shraya
Shraya
Adhasyad Gopa Gokula Nandanaha
Gopa Gokula Nandanaha
Anena Sarva Durgani
Anena Sarva Durgani
Yuyam Anjas Tarishyata
Yuyamanjas Tarishyata
Eshava Shreya Adhasyad
Eshava Shraya Adhasyad
Gopa Gokula Nandanaha
Gopa Gokula Nandanaha
Anena Sarva Durgani
Anena Sarva Durgani
Yuyam Anjas Tarishyata.
Yuyam Anjas Tarishyata.
To increase the transcendental bliss of the cowherd men of Gokul, this child will always act auspiciously for you, and by his grace only you will surpass all difficulties. For the cowherd men and the cows, Krishna is the supreme friend. Therefore he is worshipped by the prayer Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha. His pastimes in Gokul, his dham, are always favorable to the brahmanas and the cows. His first business is to give all comforts to the cows and the brahmanas. In fact, comfort for the brahmanas is secondary and comfort for the cows is his first concern. Because of his presence, all people would overcome all difficulties and always be situated in transcendental bliss. You chose this verse for me to speak on, I think. You're not up to the 10th canto in your recitation.
No. This was sent in as part of the forum. We talked about worship of cows.
I see. So this you selected for me in particular. Well, as you know, I didn't know what the verse was going to be before. I just recited it now. But the point that came to my mind, well, there were a couple of points which most came to my mind. One is that this verse, or this statement by Garga Rishi, Garga Muni, is often quoted. By who? Any guesses? Who often quotes this statement? The residents of Vrindavan themselves. When again and again they face various difficulties, and again they are saved. They often quote the words of Garga, and they say that by the grace of Narayana, Krishna has been saved. They often think that Krishna, Garga said that he's as good as Narayana. Philosophically, there's no one ontologically as good as Narayana. I don't know how you translate ontologically into Tamil. In fact, I don't know how you translate anything to Tamil, but I can imagine that word would be a little difficult. So yeah, they often remember the words of Garga, what he predicted about Krishna and Balaram. Similar prediction was made when Krishna appeared again as Nimai, that all auspiciousness will come for you. And actually, after Nimai was born, although there had been lack of rain and attendant shortages of food in that area, then after he was born there was abundant rain and Kamam Vavarsha Parjanya Sarvadug, what is it? Sarvadugha Sarvakama Dughama. I used to quote that verse a lot actually. Anena Prasav. No, I'm getting mixed up with the Bhagavad Gita verse now. Susucha Smagama Smavrajangava Prabhupada used to quote this quite a lot also. Payasvini, that word comes, the giver of milk.
Something finally Buddha.
Yeah. Yeah. The cows of in the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the rain came just as required. The right amounts, not too much, not too little. At night it would fall. In fact, it was said before I was saved by Srila Prabhupada's mercy from what I don't even want to talk about. I used to read folk stories, and in England it's very popular among certain people, the stories of King Arthur. You know about that in America also? About the legendary times of King Arthur, who was supposed to be a great saintly king of England. So I remember, because that stuck in my mind when I read this in the Bhagavatam, that the rain would only fall at night. Then that ding, that woke up something deep in my memory, that it was said even in the time of Arthur, because he was a pious king, that the rain would fall at night, just according to requirement. And the summers were pleasant, not too hot, and the winters were mild and not too cold. So some understanding was there. As I just heard the other day, of course Prabhupada said it often, that heard it the other day means by recording, of course, that Srila Prabhupada said that the Western people, they have that Aryan culture, because Prabhupada said, this is my theory, that the Western people, they have their Aryans because they were the Kshatriyas who fled from Parashuram, and they came out and they populated the Western countries. So they've forgot it to a large extent, but they had that. And actually after Christianity took over, they stamped out the old culture, which is more or less, you could say, Hindu culture was there in various ways, just like the demigod worship was there in Egypt and everywhere, but it was stamped out. But some traces remained. Even all the Christian festivals, they're adopted. For Christmas was a what they call a pagan festival, and so on and so on. So that's another great. There's a lot of intellectual work to be done. Huge amount of intellectual work. One thing which actually a lot of the intellectual work of this movement is being taken up by non-devotees. We're not taking the lead in it. One of the things is to rediscover the actual history of the world, because we learn from Bhagavatam that Maharaj Yudhishthira ruled over the whole world. And from time to time we hear about deities of Shiva and Ganesh and Vishnu in Russia, in South America, all over the place. But it's all hushed up because it doesn't fit their worldview. Another thing that just came to. There are all kinds of things in the intellectual field. The leader in galvanizing Indian scholars to protect their own culture against the ongoing attacks from Western scholars who have taken over the field of Indian studies and Sanskrit studies is Rajiv Malhotra. He's leading the charge. And in some ways he's doing very well, but he doesn't particularly like Krishna consciousness. He's not wholly opposed to it, but he himself is not that much. He personally likes Aurobindo, who's highly intellectual. Rajiv Malhotra is also highly intellectual. I went and met him once in his mansion in New Jersey. He did very well. He came to the West and he made lots of money. He was running his own business. He retired in his 40s and took up this work. But he's leading the charge in saving Indian studies and Sanskrit studies and making it desi, but in an academic way. Because one thing he pointed out, I'm way off the topic of the verse here, but you'll have to forgive me for that. Maybe I'll get back to it also. But is that for all that he's not into the Sangh Parivar type of Hindutva, you see. But he said that one thing that they've very much neglected is they've done social work, they've done political work, but they haven't done any intellectual work. And what was, I don't know if you're following the news at all, but at JNU in Delhi, there's a whole ruckus going on, and the roots of that is that JNU is 100% Marxist, which is a terrible philosophy. It has its roots, now we're going way out. It's in impersonalism, no hierarchy, everyone's all the same. And they detest any idea that anyone should be greater than anyone else, which is ridiculous. And feminism comes out of that also. Men and women, they should all be the same. And it's a disaster. So, and this, the great revered figure of JNU is Romila Thapar, she's considered an authority on everything, well, especially Indian history. But she sees everything through Marxist lens. And but Rajiv is taking up the point which actually Prabhupada made many times, that we have to see the tradition from within the tradition. You don't have any right. Just like sometimes I met with these Muslim so-called scholars, and they're saying things. I say, you don't have any right to say anything about the Vedic culture. Why should you accept anything I say about the Quran and Islam? I'm not. It's not my field. You should only accept something like that from someone who's within the field, has studied it according to its own rules. So why should I accept anything you say about the Vedas? It's not your field. You don't walk into someone's house and tell them you should do this and you should do that, and you have to know the rules. But of course their outlook is that everything should be judged according to the Islamic idea. Of course there's no one Islamic idea, although there are so many different schools of Islam. Anyway, let's try and get back to how do I get this thing here? How do I get it back? So my idea, that came to my mind when that was the first thing that came to my mind, because that's often quoted. And in the topics of Krishna, it's often quoted that the the wise men of, basically when I say the wise men of, that means Nanda Maharaj and his brother Upananda was actually older than him, but he acted as an advisor to Nanda Maharaj. But he gave the charge to Nanda, who was the youngest, because they thought he's the right man, he's the right one to take charge, he's got the qualities. So Upananda, Abhinanda, they remained as advisors. So they're simple village people, but there were so many mishaps and disturbances, and they would come together, and as the elders of the village, not only them, others would come together and they would discuss, and they'd say, yeah, this child is very special because he's being protected from so many dangers. He was protecting them from so many dangers. And so you see, Gaga, he predicted like that. So that's why. And this is often quoted. Now, just another thing, okay? We hear Anarpita chiring chirad karunyavatirno kalo. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give something which was not offered for a very long time, means since he last came. At this time, within this day of Brahma, the first time he came to give, which is Unutojvala rasang svabhakti shriyam, the very highest resplendent nectar of his own love, which means particularly Vraja Bhakti, Vraja Prem, which is given in the Bhagavatam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings are all derived from the Bhagavatam, but in the Bhagavatam itself, much is not stated. It's a summary. We know that the name of Radha isn't given, even though she's the real topic. And none of the names of the gopis are given in the Bhagavatam, although sometimes it says this one, and then later on Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur identified by their personalities. He didn't state them for fear of he wouldn't be able to do he wouldn't be able to finish the Bhagavatam if he started getting stunned in ecstasy. And Parikshit had a limited time, so he didn't state the names of the gopis, just indirectly spoke about them. So even though the essence is given in Bhagavatam, but a lot is to be expanded also, and that was done later by in the writings of the Goswamis. Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Jeev Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath. And they describe different leelas intimately, and so many times this is quoted, these statements of Gaga Rishi, and later also so many, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur himself, that Krishna Bhavanamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami wrote his Govinda Lilamrita, Kavi Karnapa wrote his Ananda Vrindavan Champu. So in this way, the pastimes of Vrindavan have been expanded, which in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's direct order to Rupa Goswami to expand on the pastimes. Other than Gauriyas, no one will accept these as doctrinal, but they're revelation from those who were there, who are there. It's not even in the past. Now another question is, here it said, Sarva Durgani Yuyamanjas Tarishyata. This is very similar to a statement in the, actually there are two verses toward the end of Bhagavad Gita. What is that? Mat Prasada Tarishyati.
Mat Prasada Sarva Durgani?
Sarva Durgani comes again. Mat Prasada Tarishyasi. By my grace you will cross over all difficulties. Here again, Sarva Durgani. If you take shelter in me. But here it's just said in a plural way. Chetasa Sarva Durgani Maprasada Tarishas. Krishna says to Arjuna. Here it's translated Sarva Durgani as all kinds of miserable conditions. But actually in Vrindavan then there cannot be any actual disturbance. there's no question of anything actually going wrong. Which is why when it seemed that Krishna was as good as dead, caught by Kaliya and dragged underwater, and he was under, and he wasn't coming up, and they thought, now he's dead, now we're all dead. And not that they were afraid of death, but they thought that we can't live without Krishna, as Krishna's dying. But Balaram was stoic and said, yeah, don't worry, it's okay. Nothing's going to happen to Krishna. The same thing, the cowherd boys, they became so confident of Krishna always protecting them from so many demons, that when this Agha, his very name means sin, came in the form of a huge snake and opened his mouth, the cowherd boys said that, oh, here's a demon come to kill us all. Oh, that looks like fun. Okay, let's go and look inside his mouth, and Krishna will save us. They became so confident of Krishna's protection. We should be a little careful and not be overconfident. Just like sometimes devotees, you say to them, oh, put the seatbelt on before you drive. No, it's all right. I already said Namaste Narasimhaya. As if, okay, you said Namaste Narasimhaya, now you can drive at 200 kilometers an hour and with your eyes closed and no seatbelt, and Krishna has to protect you. So that we should pray for Krishna's protection, but also understand that He's given us intelligence, and that's also, we should apply that intelligence. So you wanted me to speak about the cows, which is why you chose this verse. Cows, quite amazingly, the comfort for the cows comes first, and then only for the brahmanas. Because actually the brahmanas can't exist without cows. They require. Because the brahmanas need milk to drink, to make their brains suitable, and they need ghee, not only for eating. Brahmanas are very fond of eating ghee. But they need it for yajna. So you can't be a brahmana without cows. So even logically the cows come first. And practically we also see that Krishna in Vrindavan is very fond of the cows and the cowherd community. And the brahmanas are not there much. There's Madhu Mangal there, who's the local joker. It's not really like a brahmana. Well, he is in the matter of eating, that's all. He personifies the saying Brahmana Bhojana Priya. He's a local buffoon type. And Garga, he came and blessed, sent by Vasudeva, because Garga is the family priest of the Yadus. So he came, he visited, he went back. Otherwise you don't see him. Brahmanas are there. They were at the edge of Vrindavan and doing their yagyas, and then but their wives were seen to be the real devotees. And Nanda would call, Brahmanas were there because Nanda would call them for ceremonies, just like when Krishna was born, and on the birthday there are different ceremonies to perform, but they don't feature much in Krishna's pastimes. He likes the cowherd community. He personally likes to be with them. Of course, Krishna is very open and kind, and he likes all kinds of devotees in all kinds of moods and levels. And when he goes outside of Vrindavan, which some people wouldn't even say that he goes outside Vrindavan, I wouldn't even want to hear such a thing. But then he offers all respect. Narad comes in Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, and then in Mathura, in Dwaraka. Krishna, he took a journey to all the way from Dwaraka to Mithila, and he went with, generally wherever he would go with big rishis and brahmanas. When he went to Mithila, he took so many big names, rishis with him, and generally he would travel. It seemed with them. It seems that highly placed government officers, they would keep good brahmanas with them all the time. Just like Karumandurai, when he first met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although by caste he's considered a Shudra, but governmentally he was a very big figure. It's considered a Shudra means he wasn't a farm laborer or a weaver or a cobbler or any such thing, but he was kayasta, administrative caste. Actually very intelligent and very cultured, and they're descended from Chitragupta, who's the kayasta who's keeping the records in the court of Yamaraj. At least the brahmanas in Bengal claim to be descended from Chitragupta. I'm not sure if all of them everywhere are. So when he came to bathe with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the bank of the Godavari at Kovur. I was there just 1 month ago, 1 month and 1 day. I went there for the second time. Although I went, like many people, I went through it on the train so many times, because the main train line from Howrah to Chennai goes through there. So when he came to bathe in the Godavari, he came with about 1,000 men, among whom prominent were brahmanas. It's particularly mentioned that they were chanting Vedic mantras. So a big shot in the administration, or a big person like Krishna, even though Krishna appeared to be the prince of Dwaraka, so he would go accompanied by brahmanas. And then when Ramananda was to bathe in the river, then they'd do it in bathing, we think nowadays you just go in the river. But to do it properly, there should be the whole Sandhya Vandanam. Now you may say, and there may be, especially if there's, if on certain days, then there'll be, the brahmanas will help one with tarpan and all this kind of thing. So, another thing is, that's incidentally, is that that's really getting incidental. The kayastas, they also would wear the sacred thread. That question came up recently because Saraswati Thakur, you'd see him with the sacred thread. Where did he get it from? But now I think it must be from the family line. He must have had Upanayanam, because the kayastas in Bengal, traditionally, at least the Datta Vangsha, maybe, I didn't read that book, Datta Vangsha Kaustuba by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Maybe it's described in there. So many things to research. That also reminds me, talking about Gargamuni, this is a really all over the place class. Just discussing all kinds of unconnected things. Someone recently sent me a query that how is it that Garga was the family priest of the Yadus, but then Krishna went to study with Sandipani Muni? This question comes from very common lack of understanding of Vedic culture. The family priest, he would do the name-giving ceremony, maybe oversees different sanskaras, including Upanayanam samskara. In different families it would be different. In some families the the father would do the Upanayana samskara. It appears in the family of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That means the Mishras, who had come from Orissa. The maternal grandfather, in this case Nilamba Chakravarti, performed the Upanayana samskar. But who is actually going to teach them may be someone different, because someone who's busy doing this kind of priestly activities he has a different role model, and he's busy in doing priestly activities. But someone who's deep in study, and that's what he does. He studies and teaches. So the patanam, that may be more done by one kind of Brahmin, and the yajana may be more done by another kind of Brahmana. So this idea that the one who initiates you should be, there's only one guru. Not necessarily. It may be. I spoke on these things in some depth in some time. There are lots of misunderstanding over what even the word initiation means, what diksha and initiation are not necessarily exactly they don't necessarily translate cleanly back from one to the other. And then there's Vedic initiation, Vedic Upanayanam samskar, which is different to Pancharatriki Diksha. So you can have Vedic Upanayanam samskar, and then again, that means from one guru, and then from another guru. Whereas you take the Pancharatriki Diksha, but then you say you only have one guru. Yeah, but that's mantra guru. Mantra guru is one. Otherwise you can be initiated again and again and again. If for different yagyas, if there's one particular yagya, the yajaman would be initiated first. So there's so many things. I should write a book on it sometime. It would require quite some research. But it's not at all surprising that Krishna studied under one guru and was initiated by another one. It's not surprising. Even we find in even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself was teaching. His guru was Gangadas Pandit. And then when he was a young boy himself, Chaitanya, Nimai Pandit, he started teaching. Then only after that he went and got Diksha, Mantra Diksha, Pancharatriki Diksha from Ishwarapuri. So you can say, how can he be teaching and he's not initiated? But it requires some understanding. Some small book, which should be enough to discuss all these things. Or it depends how much you want to get into detail. It requires research. There's lots of research required. So there are some points. Garga was the family priest. It appears that he was acting as a family priest for the Yadus, but then you'd expect him to also be a Grihasta. But apparently he was a brahmachari. He had many disciples also. Expert in Jyotish, which is a very involved science, extremely involved. You can never come, it's one of those topics you can never come to the end of it. It's very difficult. It takes years and years to even begin it. Because there's so much to be studied. Sanskritam, mathematics, you have to have a good base in that, then you can start Jyotish. There's so many things, because we're talking about human psychology, which is unlimitedly nuanced. So there's so many things to be understood. But that's not even considered very high class, to be an astrologer. In traditional culture, there are different levels of Brahmins. Vaidyas, you also have to be very knowledgeable. But the Vaidyas who are Brahmanas, that's also considered not very high class. The topmost are those who study the Shruti and who deliberate on that, the Acharyas. Of course, the word Acharya can be an Ayurvedic Acharya also. So, but those who discuss on philosophy, those who recite the Puranas, that's also considered not very high. Although the Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of all the Puranas, so that's different. But that kind of pride is there among certain persons. They think that, we study Vedanta Sutras, we study Upanishads, and Srimad Bhagavatam, that's Puranas, that's stories. That's not right. So that's another big area of study to show how Bhagavatam is actually Sarvavete Tihasanam Saram Saram Udaharitam. The thick essence of all the Vedas and the Upanishads and everything else is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's required also to show that. Yeah, a lot of work to do in scholarship. We shouldn't reject scholarship and think, well, just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And whatever Prabhupada gave us is enough. That's true. That's completely true. But at the same time, it's unlimited. So, and Prabhupada himself writes, for instance, in one purport, he says that he gives a 1.5 line purport to one verse in the third canon, and said this statement could be a subject of great scientific research. So it's not that everything stopped or finished with Prabhupada, rather he opened the doors. We should open the door and go through the door and be guided by Prabhupada, but it's not that he says that, he himself says it right in the introduction to the Bhagavatam that readers will be benefited by going through the commentaries. He gives a whole list of commentators. Long list of commentators, including Vallabhacharya, who in some points apparently contradicts those of the Vaishnava Acharyas. So this should be encouraged as much as it is conducive, in a manner that, and in as much as it is conducive to the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is spreading Krishna consciousness to everyone. Scholarship for its own sake and becoming proud, I know so much, and trying to contradict the acharyas, that's worse than useless. But the Bhagavatam is the essence of everything. So all knowledge, Vidya Bhagavata Adivi Avati, Vidya Bhagavata Avati. Yeah. So the ultimate limit of knowledge is Bhagavatam. Krishna Tulya Bhagavat, Vibhu Sarvashray, Prati Shloke, Prati Akare, Nana Artha Koi. So the Bhagavatam is just like Krishna. It's all powerful, can give shelter to all. In every verse, in every syllable, there's so much depth and richness, so many meanings to be mined out of that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was it Krishnadas Kaviraj said that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy, their discussion, it's like mining, taking out of the jewels of the Bhagavatam, so many jewels, they took them out. So they can be taken out and polished and seen in different angles and appreciated. So there is a lot of work to do, no doubt, in the scholarly field, and this farm is something else, but actually it doesn't have to be something else. The two things can go on side by side. We find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like all other acharyas and preachers, they would go village to village. Because in the villages, not in every village, but in many villages, there were brahmanas and highly educated. Now, if you think village, you think all dull, uneducated people. All the intelligent people go to the city. We want to change that around. All the intelligent people leave the city. If you're really intelligent, you should leave the city. Even for your material benefit, what to speak of your spiritual benefit. Preaching, yeah, you can stay in the city if you're preaching. But traditionally in the village there'd be so many intelligent, there'd be schools. School doesn't mean some huge building, and you have to pay 5 lakhs to get a seat. Just the Brahmana sits under the tree and boys come, and that's all. That's the school. Where's the school? Yesterday it was under this tree. I think tomorrow it's going to be under that tree. One of these trees. That's the school. Prabhupada said also in Hyderabad farm, said you should start a Gurukul here. And he came back after some time, where's the Gurukul? Oh, we didn't build it. What do you need to build? You don't need to build. Start right away. There's so many trees. You don't need any building. Trees are there. Just go under the tree and start teaching. So that should be there. And actually this atmosphere should foster not only simple living, but high thinking also. So that even the person who's superficially uneducated is highly educated. And actually, that used to be the case. For instance, in North India, there were lakhs of people who knew the whole Ramcharitmanas. They couldn't read, but they heard it so many times and they remember. And common sayings would be there. It must be in Tamil culture also, well, apart from Tirukurai and among the Vaishnavas, Tirupavai, there'll be different sayings like that. So among Bengali Vaishnavas also, my experience, they'll quote lines from Chaitanya Charitamrita, even not related to anything particularly spiritual. There's something like, just like when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met one here in what's now called Tamil Nadu, met one Brahmana who was lamenting because Sita had been stolen, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I can't remember the Bengali, Pandit Hoya Keno Koro Vishad, something like that, saying, you're a Pandit, why are you lamenting? So that may be said in any context. Someone's upset over something, come on, you shouldn't be like, you should know better than to lament like. So like that. Everyone was spiritually educated, even without having ABC, all this kind of thing. So that culture should be there. That even our and that will naturally come if we have regular discussions on all these topics. That apart from learning ABC and all, but actually the devotees will become Krishna conscious, and they'll see Krishna in everything. They'll become wise. Just to give one example, there could be millions of examples. Gokul Chandra told me a few years ago, they were at, was it Gokul Chandra? Maybe it's someone else. At Radha Kund. And they were driving, or Govardhan, some area, and some young boy ran out, was killed. So they came to the family and they were completely calm. They said he was given by Govardhan and Govardhan has taken him back. And they didn't even want to take any money for ceremonies, nothing. It may have been that they were told that this child is something like Chitraketu was told by Parvat Muni that Narad, that this child is given and it'll be the cause of your happiness. And they may have been told in advance. They may have been expecting, but they were they're not highly educated people. Hardly in Govardhan you'll find any educated people, not local people. What do they need to be educated for? They go to the temple and do some pandagiri and they get money from the pilgrims. They don't need any education. So Say Pandagiri in Tamil also, is it? Sounds like a Hindi term. I should say that, translate that into English for the benefit of those who don't know Hindi. Pandagiri means acting as local Brahmins, priests who make their living from pilgrims, who they take donations from, either voluntarily or forcefully. Usually the latter. Depending where you are. Here in the south it's not like that, mostly. In North India it's mostly extortion, and in South India it's mostly quite civilized in this regard. In other ways maybe less civilized, but in that way at least. The priests in the temples, they mostly have some dignity about them. So yeah, there's culture everywhere. That everyone becomes wise, they can see everything, the hand of God in everything. It means they may not be super intelligent, able to quote millions of shlokas and debate and discuss, but they have a strong sense of Krishna consciousness, and they do know the Shastras. They know the stories of Krishna and Rama. So you can do that. I suggested at Nandagram in Gujarat, just like in the morning, they have the same as you, short morning program, and then everyone goes out to work when it gets light. Then in the midday they have a class, philosophical class. Then in the evening I suggested they have Leela Katha. So one day will be Ramayana, one day Chaitanya Charitamrita, and one day Mahabharata. Because Jai Damodar is there, and that's one of the things he does. He's quite learned in Mahabharata Katha. So you get all the teachings in a very pleasing way. And if you're living in that atmosphere, there's no TV, there's no Facebook, there's no electricity, and you see the land is there, Krishna is there, and you become absorbed and you can see Krishna everywhere and everything. It becomes simple living with Krishna consciousness. It naturally leads to high thinking. And there's no one to, at least it shouldn't be like that. There's no attitude to dominate others, control others, exploit others, show oneself to be very great. Living on the land should also lead to some humility, to understanding that we're at the mercy of God. The artificial life in the city makes us think that we're in control. I'm driving this car. I'm operating this computer. And it gives us the illusion of being in charge. Whereas in the country we know that Krishna's controlling. What do we need? We need rain. Not too much and not too little. And what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita about this? Huh? No, about, now I'm forgetting. Nigrinami utsrijamicha. I withhold it or I give it. He says about the rain. I forgot the first line. Dull brain today. Tapami aham varsham nigrinami utsrijamicha. He says, I am the heat of the sun. Tapami aham varsham nigrinami utsrijamicha. He said, I withhold it or I give it. So that's your life. The sun and the rain. And you completely depend on both of them. If there's not enough sun, if there's too much rain, the mangoes won't come out and the wheat won't come out. They need enough sun to ripen them. You don't grow wheat here, I don't think. It's not much in Tamil Nadu.
We tried, but weren't successful.
Must be the same with other grain crops. They need a good period of sun ripen them. So you can see the hand of Krishna. So simple living and high thinking. And protect the cows, knowing that they're very dear to Krishna. Someone asked me that recently about, what about people who are Mayavadis who protect cows? Do they also please Krishna? I said, by their philosophy they're envious of Krishna, but they're inclined to cows. So that's Krishna's way of tricking them also. That even though they're against Krishna, but they feel very strongly about the cows, they won't get bhakti directly, but they will get minimally punya. And that will help them. Just like we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he preached to the Mayavadis in Varanasi. And although their philosophy is offensive, but Prabhupada comments that actually they were very pious, inasmuch as they had great faith in the Vedas, they were residing in a holy place, they were bathing in the Ganga 3 times a day, they were performing austerities, their goal of life was non-materialistic. So they had many good qualities, but they had the great fault of being envious of Krishna. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu removed that, then they became very good. That was a good asset for them. So that's true in general about Indians. That there may be in India even today some characters like Kamsa and Jarasandha who are just, well, even Jarasandha in many ways he was worshipping Vishnu as Shalagram. He protected his citizens. Duryodhana also, they had the great fault of being envious of Krishna. But most of them, they're pious but misguided, and if properly guided, they can take up Krishna consciousness very well. Whereas culturally, in the Western world, don't mind me saying so, anyway he's asleep, so it doesn't matter, he won't hear it. In the Western world, people are culturally challenged. I use that phrase in this Women Masters and Mothers book. They say physically challenged, and now they started off with the word spastic, and then they said physically handicapped, and then they said physically challenged, and now the one is differently abled or something like this. It's called politically correct language. That's right. It's difficult to keep up with it, how they keep on changing it. And they used to say nigger or negro, then they said black, and then they said African American, and what's the latest one?
We'll say African American.
African American, still in there. Huh? You must be, by your body, which you're not, half white, half black, is it something like that? You don't know? Both of your parents were like you. I see. So it was going back a bit further. But it's like a caste system. If you got black in there, you're black, right? They don't think of you as being half white. You're black. It's like you're rejected. No one will say that unless in the Ku Klux Klan. But that's how they feel. It is there. That feeling is there still. Isn't it? It's very bodily identification, goes very deep. I gave a lecture once about saving people from Brahmanism. Did you hear that? No. To be a Brahmin, it's a big hurdle to overcome. I'm a Brahmin. In Krishna consciousness, it's a big pride. I'm a Brahmin. Someone came to me this the other day in one place. Actually, it happens quite often. Someone comes and tells me, "I'm initiated. I'm a Brahmin." By his family, he meant, because he told his family name. I'm a Brahmin. Wait a minute. Go back and read Prabhupada's books. Still stuck on that consciousness. Srila Prabhupada wouldn't attack that so much. He would say, okay, then be a real Brahmin. Be a real Brahmin, chant Hare Krishna, and show what it means to be a real Brahmin. He would encourage. Rasaraj, this is the most spaced out class I've given ever, I think. I didn't keep on any topic for more than half a second. Well, a little longer than that. Rasaraj told me years ago that there was a smarter couple from here, from Tamil Nadu, told him that they had met Prabhupada in Los Angeles, and they used to do this Rukmini Kalyanam, but they stopped. Radha Kalyanam, but they'd stopped doing it, and they met Prabhupada, and Prabhupada told them, this is the first time he met them, you should do that. You should start it again. So they got a lot of faith in Prabhupada, because he told them that. The Vaishnavas don't do that, the Smartas do that. Or they used to do it. So, okay, I'll finish this class. It's Hare Krishna. All over the place. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Surrender to Krishna and look after the cows and the brahmanas. Alright, so we'll finish there. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.